Yo, what is up guys? It's Pedro here. In today's video, I'll be giving you guys a Commanders Stadium update and how there is some momentum for the Commanders to get their new stadium at the old RFK site. So if you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell as well. Alright, so it's been a while since I've done one of these, probably, a few months since I've done a stadium update video. We got some information and it's a slow part of the offseason, not much football to talk about, but that is changing very, very soon. In less than 2 weeks, let me pull up the tweet. The Commanders should have a new owner. Then we got the press conference probably after that. And then within a week, I believe, we're going to have training camp. And after that, we got football for like 6 months. It's glorious, in terms of training camp, preseason, then the regular season. Then you got the playoffs as well. It's going to be a good time. But for the next couple weeks, it's going to be boring, but it is what it is. But once we get that new owner voted in July 20th, so again, 12 days from today, from when I'm recording this. And yeah, after that, we got the press conference. That's going to be really exciting, and I'm going to have a bunch of coverage on that. But let's get into the stadium news, because of course, once Josh Harris comes in, and maybe even in that press conference, they're going to ask him about these questions, and he's going to have to decide: does he want it in Maryland, Virginia, or DC? Because when Dan Snyder was the owner, these states were not in a bidding war to see who would get the stadium. But now they want the stadium because the Commanders / Redskins / football team, Washington football team, have a great history, and especially before Dan Snyder was there, they're one of the top franchises in all of American sports. But Dan Snyder came in and ruined that, and they didn't want they didn't want to have anything to do with Dan Snyder. But now that he's going to be gone in a couple weeks, less than a couple weeks, they're like, these states are like, okay, I'll come in and I want that stadium. So whether it's Maryland, who right now that's where FedEx Field is, Virginia, which they haven't had a Commander Stadium, and I also saw that the Wizards are considering moving there. That was just a rumor, and then DC, which I think 90% of the fan base want it in DC. I 100% want it in DC. Hey, RFK is the preferred site because we have all that history there. But if you find anywhere in DC, I'm happy with it. I know there's not a ton of room, but they can find space. That's where I want it. RFK site or in DC, because we are the Washington Commanders. We were the Washington Redskins. So it's Washington's in front of the name. You want that, team in the city or wherever the district you're in, and I think that's where it should be. And I know teams like the Giants, their stadium is in New Jersey, and same thing with the Jets, and there's other teams as well, but I would prefer it to be in Washington, where all that history was, where they did win the Super Bowls. They were playing in RFK, the seasons that they won those Super Bowls. So I think, for the most part, so I think that bringing back that history would be good for them. And yeah, I think it just makes sense. But again, if it's in DC, that's fine as well. And then Maryland, I live in Virginia, Northern Virginia, so that's probably the worst one for me. At the Harbor would be okay. And Virginia, again, I don't really want it there, but rather have it in DC, or rather have it in Virginia than Maryland. But there's a three-way race between all these teams to land the Commanders, and that's starting to take shape. Congress is preparing to introduce legislation that could allow the Commanders to build a stadium at the old RFK Stadium. So some big news there. And let's go over to a story. This was yesterday. The Comer prepares legislation that should allow Commanders Stadium at RFK. So the RFK site the momentum's building there. The momentum is really building there. And I think that's starting to get more and more likely. And here's like a whole thread. If you guys want to read through it, I'll read through some of it. And I haven't, read through this. So chairman of the powerful congressional committee that oversees DC is preparing to introduce legislation that could ultimately allow DC to build a Commanders football stadium or another mixed-use development at the Decrepit RFK Stadium site, a major development in Mayor Mario Bowser's pursuit to bring the team back to the city. So that is some good news for sure. And let's see. let's go over some more things. I haven't read all of this. So Comer's legislation, once it is introduced, could mark a new chapter for DC as it competes with Maryland and Virginia for a chance to woo the Commanders to a new stadium, from its current site in Prince George's County. One thing that's very interesting is that, again, this was not happening at all when Snyder was, the owner. But once he is leaving and, they know he's leaving, this is all changing. So Bowser has long sought to bring the Commanders back to D.C., although federal legislation freeing up the RFK site would only be a first step in that goal, with a number of hurdles remaining, including a divided D.C. council who would have differing opinions about how the site should be used. And then two people familiar with the planned legislation who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive negotiations said it involved a lease extension, with one of those people describing it as a 99-year lease extension and modification which would have broadened the city's options for what it could do with the land. The current RFK lease between DC and the National Park Service is slated to end in 2038. So 15 years. I believe the FedEx Field lease is like done in 2027 or 2028, so that's probably when they would want a new stadium by, and restricts land usage to only sports, recreation, and entertainment. Should Comer's legislation move forward, DC would likely have a seat at the negotiating table as the Commanders seek a new home among the city, Maryland and Virginia, upping the ante, and a debate over the future of the team. The exact timing of an introduction of the bill was not yet clear, so I guess we'll hear about that later. And then the last kind of paragraph, Comer's role in helping to shepherd the RFK deal to DC somewhat resembles an olive branch after his House Oversight Committee earlier this year held several continuous hearings in which Republicans lambasted crime and public... Okay, whatever. This is not really to do with football, but that's kind of a little bit of an update there on the RFK site. But I was trying to find the tweet, but I could not find the tweet where I saw like Maryland is really pushing to get a stadium. I swear I saw that in the last week. It might have been 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I saw that, and so there's some momentum a little bit building for Maryland as well. I would probably, if I had to rank in terms of most likely to get a stadium, I'm going to be optimistic and say DC won with, like, let's say 35%, and then, or let's go 40% DC, 35% Maryland, and then 25% Virginia. Maybe even less for Virginia. I think Virginia has the least likely chance to get the stadium, but you never know. We don't know what Josh Harris wants, but I think amongst Commanders fans, we want it in DC. And then besides that, I know some people want it in Maryland. That's mostly people who live in Maryland. And I know a lot of people who want it in Virginia. That's people who, live in Virginia. But I think all of those people, for the most part, would be very happy with it in DC. I think the percentage of people that would be upset that the stadium's in DC is under 10%. If the stadium's in Maryland, I probably think over half the fans are upset with that. If it's in Virginia, I think over half the fans are upset with that as well. So, if they get, there's not many decisions that 90+% of the fan base or company or, that will agree with. But this decision, if they move to DC, especially RFK, they move back there, I think most of the fan base will be in agreement that that is the right move for sure. So just a little bit of update for you guys. And maybe I might do a stream tomorrow. And any video suggestions, drop them down below. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace.